Hi, Suzi.
Hello, it is
So nice to see you.
always.
Always. The theme I brought today is adolescence. First of all, it took me a long time to pronounce it right, but I made it. And I want to. Last time we talked about menopause, and I don't know, it took me back to this stage in life, the transition between childhood to adulthood. And I realized that there's a lot of cultural influences. First of all, I wanted to ask you, when I say adolescence, what comes up for you?
Yeah, that's funny. Um, I mean, it's a good question, right? Because it's a word that I think people respond to in part according to where they are, like how long has it been since you were an adolescent? Also according to memory, like how do you remember your adolescence? Also according to science, right? So if we say, well, the brain doesn't actually fully mature until about the age of 27. And certainly it used to be that we said adolescence ended long before 27. And now some of us really feel that adolescence ends way after 27. So I had,
Interesting.
all kinds of things come to mind for me. I think personally, what I kind of recall, and then what I see in the adolescents with whom I work, and I'll just clarify that I don't work with many adolescents themselves,
That
but
was one of my questions. Yeah.
when I work, because I refuse to,
Okay.
um, in general. But I do work with parents of adolescents. So for me, there is this kind of funny thing of when I work with a parent of a child of any age, but certainly in that adolescent stage, I am working with the parent on behalf of the child,
Okay.
right? And what I'm trying to, uh, I don't have specific goals in terms of what people should do or not do. But one of the kind of very general things I'm trying to do is move parents from a place where they are too focused on their own fears and projecting those fears onto their adolescents, or focused on the kind of unfulfilled places in themselves and projecting those onto adolescents. So, um, what really comes to me is that adolescence, like menopause, right? So we use this word last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever we spoke, and I tried to change it from menopause to, and you did too, to kind of transition,
Mm-hmm.
because menopause is diagnostic in a way. And transition is natural and open, and many things come with it. And adolescence is the same. We look at it as a life stage, and we often look at it as a very fraught life stage.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, why not look at it as a bridge? And it's a difficult bridge because folks are still coming from the womb in a way, even though they're 6'2" and smell horrible. They're still kind of coming from the womb and crossing this bridge into knowing themselves, not in opposition to, and not necessarily in accord with. Right? So I see adolescence as a transition, short or long.
Mm-hmm. And what would be the movement when when we look at it from family constellation lens, what's happening in this? You're a child, uh, you're very connected to the parents, and I feel there's
Dependent. You're
dependent,
dependent.
and then something happens, and I'm curious to hear about this.
So I think from a constellation perspective, or maybe I shouldn't put that big stamp on it and, you know, uh, maybe I should say from my perspective,
Okay.
having studied constellations, among other things. Um, it is it is a movement into self-sufficiency, into a kind of independence, which is not isolation, it is just sense of capacity and that transition from I need them to tell me to I know something.
Mm.
In that movement, right, from a constellation perspective, from my perspective, there is a delicacy, like a powerful delicacy. It's funny, 2 words to put together, but it feels both powerful and something delicate, where the adolescent, under circumstances that are, um, enriched, where nobody needs too much from them, they are allowed to move into independence, taking from behind, but not feeling forced to either duplicate or just be in opposition.
It sounds impossible. Right now, when I hear it, it's like, wow, it's a lot.
It it's a lot, but it is I honestly, I mean, again, sometimes you say things that are cool because I think, like, "Oh, I didn't know I thought that." So I'm having this moment of like, "Oh, I didn't know I thought that." For me, the bridge is natural, and what gets in the way is a whole culture or society that is built upon thwarting that natural movement.
Since this is really important, I need another word for thwarting because I'm not familiar.
Thwarting. Yeah,
Thwarting.
yeah. Getting in the way of,
Mm, okay.
right? So there is a kind of instinct that is both people make money from it, so it has that quality, but it's also a fear-based instinct that says, I'm going to unconsciously, sometimes consciously, but I think more often unconsciously, stop my child from moving across that bridge, and I'm going to insist on either pulling them back to me or insist on following them so closely
Mhm.
that they don't get to discover their own frailties or their own strengths. I think psychologically, I mean, I grew up in this country, so I can't speak for other places, but I think, you know, the idea that most institutions are built around separation,
Mhm.
churches, temples, synagogues, schools, prep schools, public schools, private schools, it's all separation, right? And because of that, we are moving against a kind of natural, organic flow into growth.
what you're saying here is a big thing, I think, because we belong to society.
Mhm.
Society, maybe these days, or maybe always, or I don't know, but have the separation that it's very basic. I mean,
Mhm.
a school starts when you're 6 year old or before even.
Mhm.
It's built in your life.
Mhm.
How do you bridge that?
So you'd be happy to know I have no fucking idea. Don't edit that.
I won't.
Um, and simultaneously, I think, as long as we continue to question, we are in a better position to at least mitigate um, some of that influence that says, "Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid." So, one of the images that I have, that has come out of my work, right? So it's l it sounds like I'm saying it comes from me to you, but really it actually comes from the work to me, right? Is this idea of, is it possible to not trap our adolescence, which we know as a time of experimentation. And we know that some people are going to get very close to the edge of that cliff. We know that. And we know that if somebody is standing at the edge of the cliff and we startle them, that doesn't mean they're going to be safe. In fact, it may mean they go over the cliff, right? So, one of the images that feels very important to me is not to hold our adolescence. And by the way, I think it starts much earlier, not to hold our adolescence within the gaze of our fear or the lens of our fear.
Hmm.
So the school may be doing, the church may be doing, the politics may be doing, and I am making a little contribution to the stream that says growth is good, growth is sloppy, sometimes growth is scary, and sometimes growth is beautiful.
Hmm.
And I am going to learn to trust your compass for you and trust my compass for me.
Yeah. It sounds so gracie, you know. But what I really love is your word sloppy. Growth is sloppy. And I heard it maybe a few years ago when you said it, and I thought this is great because we want to grow, and how it is right to grow, and to become and to be beautiful, and but it's sloppy. So we have to accept the ugliness or the weirdness or all of it. Um,
And some of the decisions that are made, I've been writing a bit and talking a bit about this idea, which is it's from science, right? That we have this and I think it's a safety behavior. We have this odd habit that may feel good in a way, but actually limits us. And our brains look ahead like it is in 10 years or your son in 10 years, right? Or me in 10 years. And I have a habit, because the world tells me so in a way, that I could be better at who I am, but I will be basically the same person.
mm,
And we underestimate how much we actually change. We actually really underestimate that.
mm,
And for me, when I think about that, I think, well, the idea that identity is not immutable, that identity actually changes. is a comforting idea,
Mm.
but it kind of takes me out of the sense of one day I will get there, because it kind of says, no, you will never get there. You are an ever evolving being.
Wow. I read about this. I don't remember. Every 7 or 14 years, all the cells in the body change. And I personally find it little scary because everything is chaotic. At least I can hold on to my identity. But then if this is also changeable, wow, where is the
Where's the
ground?
essence, right? Where's
Yeah.
the yeah. So I mean, maybe, maybe it's neither one nor the other, maybe it's a both and I think most people are not very good at both going back to separation, we're really good at separating, and we're really good at separating from others, and we're really good at separating from ourselves,
Mm.
but I think most things are in the both right? So when going back to adolescence, I think one of the things about the adolescent brain that we can't remember, we actually can't remember it. Like we can remember things we did and people we were with and mistakes we made. And, you know, I have a long laundry list of like, whoa, who was that who did that? Right. And wow, lucky I survived, right? Myself. Yikes. Right? But what I can't remember is when my brain worked actually in a different way, where when I looked out, everything was black and white, everything was concrete, where even at 19, 20, maybe I was super smart, right? But I didn't have access to the nuances that a more mature brain has. I
Yeah.
can't actually remember it. I believe it
Mhm.
because it explains some things. It explains, why I did that and not that, but I can't actually remember it. So as parents, as we look at our adolescent children, there is something that we literally can't remember
Mm.
about that time. We remember the external conditions, but we don't remember the internal mechanisms. And so I look at, my kid or your kids, and I think, what the hell are they doing? Why are they doing that? Right? Because I can't remember why they're doing that. I actually can't remember it.
Hmm. So you're actually saying that we cannot fully understand them at this point.
Absolutely.
So what can we do? What can we be for them or for ourselves as parents to?
So I love the question because I think it comes up always in constellation. Um, and I think that there is a nuance for us where we can be self centered in the best of ways, which is different than conceited or greedy or thinking everything's about me or the ever popular narcissistic. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is to hold to the center in the present. All right, going back to what we were talking about before, I know the center is going to be different in 10 years.
Mhm.
I'm not living in the projection and I'm not living in the past. I am trying to be present to the present. So the image that I always have is this idea that I am going to keep cultivating the ground that is around me, the things that I care about, so that I can stand behind my child rather than lean into them, be there when they look back to find me. Now, I know that my kid is going down some dark alleys. I see it. I know it. Not my kid, but one's child, right?
Right.
My kid has also gone down dark alleys. Um, but I know that's gonna happen because of the sloppiness of growth, right? We're experimenting with life, right? But and actually we get to do that, right? As Susie, I get to experiment with life, but not in the same ways. My experiments are not that interesting. They are much more boring. So I want to be able to maintain my heart rate. I want to be able to maintain my easy breath. I want to be able to lean into all that has come before me. I want to celebrate all that I have gathered so that when I look out at my child, my tendency is not to reel them in and pull them back and stop them from learning about their own capacity, and instead superimpose my sense of the world, of safety, of identity onto them. Because I do remember when my mother did that to me, and it was always out of fear, right? It was always out of fear. So there's something that I get to do in a way better than she did. Not because I am a better person, but because I am less in fight, flight, freeze, and fawn than she is. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
What comes to my mind is, let's say, a, a, a kid that is joining, the bad gang, that the parents see that this is happening, or is very isolated, meaning doesn't find new belonging yet, and so I'm really like in the tension between let them be and guidance, and I'm wondering how it's
So
coming together.
I'm saying both in a
Mhm.
way. And I'm saying that so it's not a strategy, right? It's a way in the world, right? When I am at my best, or when we are at our best as the guides, as the gatekeepers for what came before us, right? We have access to creativity, we have access to noticing generative movements, we have access to ways to accompany rather than ways to imprison, right? So when I am afraid and desperate, one of the things that happens to me is that I lose access to creativity. And when I lose access to creativity, I actually behave in the same way. I also join the gang.
I'm
I
taking something very uh, radical or not radical, I don't know. But let's say you have a teenage girl that stops eating. You see it. I mean, and I'm wondering here how to use what we have to, you know, to stand behind or among or what. Yeah.
so first of all, again, that's a very scary thing, right? Eating disorders are scary things. Drugs are scary things. Gangs are all of these things are very, very frightening. And I'm being really clear that I don't have a teaspoonful of sugar. That's not what I'm absolutely not saying that. What I'm saying is that what doesn't work is when we too, through our own narrowness, move into their sphere and live within the eating disorder ourselves. live within the addiction ourselves, live within the violence of the gang ourselves, right? So there is a way in which I want to stay open and not positive, but optimistic about life force.
So let me see if I understood it. It's almost like there's a part that is, let's take this eating disorder. There's the part of the girl who doesn't eat, but I'm going to hold the part of she can eat, and sh- she, is it something like that?
It is, yeah, yes, in a way. So, yes, in a way. Um, Let me change that to yes, absolutely. And, right? And that I'm going to recognize that something is going on with her that I actually don't understand. That's the first thing, right? So I'm not going to rush to a simplistic explanation,
Mm-hmm.
which is really not for her. It's really for me, right? So it's the first thing. There is some complexity that I don't get,
Mm.
right? So in a way, I am freeing her immediately from my need to understand. I am saying, hey, I don't need to understand in order to feel love,
Okay.
right? Secondly, I am going to admit as I lean into those who came before me, I'm going to acknowledge I am afraid.
Okay.
I
S-
I am afraid. That's me,
okay.
right?
So the acknowledgement is not in here, but it's in here. So you take it back, and then you can look at your child with the fear in the back.
With the fear in the back and the sense of accompaniment in the back too.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look at constellation, it is sometimes things come up like, again, going to the eating disorder. Um, and by the way, I think it's actually not a disorder, it's another order, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you look at constellation, the facilitator is so excited when they find, and me too, I'm not mocking it, but when you find the starving ancestors, because then you think, aha,
Mhm.
aha, her eating disorder has to do with a loyalty to the starving. My invitation is don't think that. My invitation is don't search for a simplistic answer.
Mhm.
Search for courage. Search for courage so you can stay creative. And these starving ancestors may be an aspect not so much of diagnosis, but of accompaniment,
Mhm.
right? And the doctor and the trauma that I may not know about that she suffered when she was 12. And, 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 and. And it is my beautiful responsibility as the one who has more resources than she does to remain curious, to remain interested, to remain imaginative, and to take this idea that we were talking about in the beginning and see her in 10 years.
Mm.
Know that who she is now is not who she will be, and release her from my narrow imagery.
You know what comes very strongly to me? I hear everything you say and I love it. And there's another voice in me who says, maybe our, like, when we try to capture our children or to, you know, give our values on them, is there an aspect that is actually giving them security? I don't know how to phrase it right.
Yeah, say it one more time.
I'll say it one more time. I'll give a big example. For instance, in Israel, I feel because everybody is so close to each other and see each other all the time, it's kind of protecting you versus a person who's anonymous, has nobody that actually looks at him, and is able to go much more to the edges because there's no eyes on him in a way. Does it make sense? Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I was actually just as you started that, um, so I think there is no paradigm that works across the board for everybody, right?
Mhm.
And again, I think the separation piece, is very much for the comparative mind. If I had done it this way, if they could live this way, if they had this, if they had that, if they, right? And that's a mechanism of, separation versus what? Versus integration, like the all, right? The all. When people go to the edges of something, right, the edge of life in a way we're talking about here, when they get to that precipice, do they jump or do they turn back? Right? What's the we can't really predict it in some sense, but we can say, you know what? Either way, like this is radical from the root system. Either way, I stand behind them, right? Like no question. And if there is no question, maybe we soften the choice and maybe belonging, which I think is at the heart of most things, right? The gangs. I had a friend who worked with, he worked with two populations. He worked with religious cults and he worked with gangs.
Mm.
And he said it was the same thing for him,
Mm.
that it was always, and he was not a facilitator, it was really the power of belonging.
Yeah.
And you call one thing good and the other thing holy or whatever it is, that part doesn't matter. What matters is the sense of belonging,
Right.
right? So for me, as a parent, as a mentor, as a teacher, as a facilitator, as an artist, as a human, I would like to find ways to imply that belonging is a matter of being and not a matter of accomplishing something. So when you hear these kids who, and it's very simply described, and I hate it, but I get it. When you hear about kids who learn something on social media or who have like validation for their eating disorder or for their suicidal ideation or for something that is so terrifying to us. Rather than social media, rather than use that phrase social media, which makes it sound like it's something evil out there, what if we replace that word with belonging
Mhm.
and begin to imagine that that's the real search?
Yeah. This age, I think it's searching for belonging in a in different places, and I wonder if the belonging is not established in childhood. What happens in the next, eh, you know, uh, in the adolescence? Um,
Yeah, when I said that before about I think it starts much younger, that's actually what I was trying to allude to, that there's something that we skip in a way often, and we don't make the connection between, like, the search for belonging here and then something that in the past was a question or became a question, right? When Bert Hellinger talks about this idea when parents divorce and a child is 4, and it just feels so present to, exclude the other parent, and there is no question, and this is about us, and right? And we forget that we're actually changing the shape of belonging for the child. And is there a way where we can get to leave a relationship that no longer serves us and and hold the container? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah.
And I think there always is, and I think it has to be the idea is really a solo idea. Like, I can do my part, and whether the other person does or doesn't,
Mhm.
I can do my part.
Um, Susie, can you talk a little bit about? I know Bert Hellinger was talking about spheres, and we stay with the mother, and then we move to the father. As girls and as boys, it's different.
I will talk about it. I don't like this
You don't,
conversation.
you don't like this, okay?
I preface it by saying I don't like it just because I think that, it assumes a kind of binary that I don't really assume, and I think that we are living in a moment, uh so I may lose all your listeners for you. We I
I
think
don't
we are
think so.
living I think we're living in a beautiful moment where actually a whole bunch of more fluid identities are, being allowed, despite certain things going on, can't put the genie back in the bottle, are being allowed to surface. So I preface everything by saying that.
Mhm.
What I think about your question, and, sometimes I look at certain things that Bert said that sound very dogmatic now, and I try to think, well, if I don't just turn against him, because that's ridiculous, but rather try to understand in a less surface way and in a deeper way, then I actually always find my own way with things, right? So the mother gives birth,
Mhm.
and that's still true for most people, right? Part of the reason I talk so much about that life in the womb is because of what happens when we're born. When we are out of that intensive, because it's a learning intensive, where the whole world is seen and felt through the eyes of this shelter, right? And so we are with her. And even when the doctors say to us, no, little baby, you're out in the world, we say, no, we are not out in the world. We are still in this shelter. We are still in this shelter. And then eventually, if things go well and she feels a certain level of security and we feel a certain um, freedom to wander, we begin to discover perhaps our father. Certainly, we discover others, and perhaps we get to discover our father, which is a beautiful thing because it is through these two people. Even if he's a sperm donor, it is through these two people.
Hmm. Yeah.
Even if we are adopted, it is through the original two people that we actually know ourselves. So the movement from her into a wider sphere that often is guided by him, but not always,
Mm.
Sometimes it is guided by another mother. Sometimes it is guided, by a group, right? That movement into this wider sphere allows us to, if we're fortunate, experience ourselves in the broader outside of the womb,
Mhm.
and that's a good thing because most of the world is outside of the womb, right? It allows us to build capacity and to feel ourselves as real, right? Whether or not we are with her. So for me, I don't mean this in a religious way, but maybe I mean it in a religious way too. But we get to be born again and again and again, and we get to leave her again and again and again.
It's so interesting, Susie. I when I talk to you many times, I try to get to practicality or bring a question and okay, what's the answer? And you always go to a place before the answers, to the essence, like um so I want to acknowledge this, that it's always like whoa, 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 there is essence to things, and then you get to choose what you want to do in whatever you do. Yeah. um I have so many questions around this stage of life. I'm thinking about my own, how I felt, what was on my mind. um I'm thinking how independent I was, because where I grew up, you get to live at the age, or I think it was 15, to from your parents' house to neighborhood of your own, like peers, which
Oh,
is
well,
quite
it's so funny because I was just going to say to you, hey, Edis, where were you when you were 15?
yeah.
Wow. What is that called? Like, what is that?
It's funny. It's those words that nobody understands. It's called Tainer. It's a neighborhood of from 14 to I don't 18. That you get to pick maybe somebody to live with. So it's two in this house, another two in this house, and it's a neighborhood of teenagers. Uh,
Wow.
it's not happening anymore, but when I grew up, that was the structure. And I think a lot about this age. I feel I'm really curious if there's like an unfinished movement when you talk about stages of life. um, I'm very curious about it. Can we be stuck in a stage, in a way? What is a successful transition? It takes me to many, many questions. Um, for us as humans to look and to go back to our own adolescence and work with it, because it's still alive in us, I
For
think.
sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And I think, first of all, I would like to read a little bit about um, that mechanism of sending kids into a neighbor because it's an interesting, not as good or bad, but for me, it's extremely interesting because one of the aspects of it is discover yourself, your own capacity, your own ability to cooperate and collaborate, and there will still be this container around you. So it's not like you're being thrown out into the world before you're ready, but we're building this in so we don't move from childhood into adulthood and skip the bridge. Right? And skip the bridge. So there's something whether it was successful enough, it's successful in reality or it's a good aspiration. I love the idea. I really love the idea. And I think for me, it is kind of what I'm saying in general, that we as parents. Okay, so 2 things. One, I will answer a little bit your query there, or your inquiry, what I kind of respond to it. But one is that we care for our adolescent self rather than discard them. Right? So sometimes when people talk about inner children and young self and blah, 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 I really like to point out that often we're talking about like the baby or the toddler who's adorable and didn't know. And sometimes I really like to think about my 15-year-old self, because it took me a long time to, uh, it's a funny phrase, it took me a long time to love her,
Mm.
because she was so bad. Like, she behaved very badly in many ways. So I feel like, really, how important that is in terms of completion, to find a way to care for her so that she can come along versus me keep going back there,
Mhm.
right? There is something that I see now that she couldn't see, but there is something she knew then that I don't know now.
Yeah.
And so we are connected, and if I can find ways to really, we talk about integrating the ancestry and integrating our parents, and how about integrating our younger selves, especially our adolescents,
Yeah.
right? So completing, you use the word completing, right? The interrupted movement and constellation, I think, is in many places. And it's a creative opportunity to think, like, how can I complete that movement now?
Yeah. It takes me to so many thoughts, and I didn't. Now I feel, wow, it's such an important phase to tend to. It's Yeah, and I'm left with many questions. I could do a whole another
Our next
conversation,
one.
our next one on this, but I realized that our time is up. Um, I'm left with the question in my heart: what was the extremest thing that you did as a teenager? That I don't know if you have time to answer. Um, and also, I do want to emphasize on something you said today, that when we look at our teenager children, there's something that we don't understand, and to accept it, it's a present, because it's almost like saying you don't need to understand him or her in order to love or to give belonging, or um it's not together. It can be, hey, I don't understand, but we're family, or yeah.
Yeah. And that
And
idea for me of, I don't have to understand to stand behind you, and my place is behind you.
right, right.
That
And
is that's the only place.
right. Yes, and I'm also going to say about this, that when there's a teenager and if you stand here, and I'm going to borrow it from your teachings, then when he looks back, there's nobody. And yeah, it's very helpful to understand um where to stand. Susie, thank you so much. I know you have to run to another, I don't know what. It was a pleasure to sit with you, and I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to our next
me
conversation.
too. Always, always. All
Okay,
right. Much
thank
love.
you.